Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for viewing my video. This video I'm going to give my reading wrap up for the week of June 30th through July 6th. I completed 2 books, so I'm going to give reviews of those books. I read parts of 3 other books, so I'm going to talk briefly about those 3 books. I got 2 new books, so I'm going to talk briefly about those. I'm going to talk about a Wobble I completed and one that I'm currently working on. The first book I'm going to talk about is Sea People, The Puzzle of Polynesia by Christina Thompson. I got the idea to read this book from a comment that Justin at Triumphal Reads made on one of my videos. Before I talk about the book, I'm going to give a brief author bio, which is from the back of the book. Christina Thompson is the editor of Harvard Review and the author of Come On Shore and We Will Kill and Eat You All, a New Zealand story, which was shortlisted for the Douglas Stewart Prize for Nonfiction and the William Saroyan International Prize for Writing. Her essays and criticism have appeared in numerous publications, including Vogue, The American Scholar, the Journal of Pacific History, and 3 editions of Best Australian Essays. She is the recipient of numerous fellowships and awards, including a National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship, Writer's Grant from the Australia Council, and a National Endowment for the Humanities Public Scholar Award. A dual citizen of the United States and Australia, she lives outside of Boston with her family. This book talks about the history of the attempts to determine who first settled the Polynesian islands, where they came from, and how they got there. It started in the late 1500s when seafarers from the west first discovered Polynesian islands. They were mostly from Spain, England, and the Netherlands. It continued in the 1600s and 1700s. There was repeated islands that the seafarers came upon, and some of them were populated, some weren't. The initial meetings between the 2 peoples didn't always go all that well for either of the groups. The Polynesians had no written history. They just had oral history. And this created a problem because the explorers, the seafarers, they were more fact-based. And the oral histories of the Polynesians, they had their mythologies was intertwined with actual experiences. They included inanimate objects such as rocks and items like that, as well as animate objects in their story. There was a big disconnect between the way the 2 groups recorded things. A big impetus for exploring these areas was that there was a strong belief amongst the European countries that there was a continent south of where it had been explored before, and certainly the Antarctica is there, but they thought there was a continent with riches and resources that was there to be discovered, and that was one big reason why they explored the area. Eventually the islands were colonized except for Tonga. I'm not sure why it wasn't colonized. The studies went on as the islanders were more and more explored. Items were dug up. There was a point when the scientists and other people that were studying the islands totally discounted the oral history of the Polynesians. Pottery was found in some of the digs, which helped determine when the areas were first settled or areas close to it were first settled, and push the time frame back way earlier than they originally thought. Many discounted that the Polynesians could have had the navigation skills to get between the widely separated islands. There was somewhat of a racial bias in this and in a lot of the views of the Europeans. Carbon dating was discovered around 1950, and this helped greatly in establishing timelines. And the carbon dating was refined as time went on too, which made the measurement of times of things more precise. Around 1980, several ships were constructed that were similar to the vessels that the Polynesians would have used in their travels, and these ships were sailed with navigators using the methods that were available to the Polynesians, and these voyages were a big game changer, showing what was possible. And the final big thing that scientifically was used was DNA testing to help answer some of these questions. I struggled a bit with all the names of the locations and the names of the many people that were involved throughout the years. And I also struggled, sounds funny to say, but I struggled with just the directions, because I live in the northeast of the U.S., in Connecticut actually, and to me, Asia's to the east, but actually from a Pacific Ocean perspective, say Japan would be to the west, and what I would consider the west coast of, say, America or South America would be to the east. And I struggled a little bit. I should have actually just brought up a map and used that. I thought the author did a great job with her writing. History is sometimes dry and just very factual, but she made the book interesting, and the facts and voyages and such things she presented, it was interesting to read them. I recommend this book to anyone who wants to learn about the history of the Polynesian islands, the settlers, how they likely were able to discover and populate them, where they were from originally. The only thing I would recommend is that I read this book as a book that I borrowed from Hoopla, so it's an ebook. And this is one of the books that's probably true of most history books. Ideally, if you'd like to read this book, I suggest you get a physical copy. Possibly your library has it, hopefully, but if not, maybe purchase it, because I think this is a book that would have been good to refer back on occasion. And it's much harder to do with an ebook. Hoopla doesn't give the flexibility and moving back and forth that Nook or Kindle does. I rated this book 4 stars. Next, I'm going to read a short passage from the book so you can get an idea of the writing style. The Tuamotus, also known as the Lower Dangerous Archipelago, feature in almost every early European account of the Pacific, for the simple reason that they lie directly across most variants of the Great Northwest Line. A screen of some 78 low islands or atolls, the Tuamotus stretch for 800 miles along a north-southeast axis about halfway between the Marquesas and Tahiti. Most of these atolls are comparatively small, on average perhaps 10 to 20 miles wide, but their key feature, at least from a navigator's point of view, is their height. None of these islands reach an elevation of more than 20 feet. Most are barely 12 feet above the tide line at their highest point. They are, as Stevenson put it, as flat as a plate upon the sea. What this means for sailors is that they are visible until one is all but upon them. And later navigators, who more about what they were getting into, tended to avoid this maze of reefs and islands, that were also sometimes known as a labyrinth. The second book I completed this week is Seoulmates by Susan Lee. This was a book I originally started in May as part of AAPI Heritage Month, but I didn't complete it within that month. Before I talk about the book, I want to give a short author bio, which is from the back of the book. Susan Lee has had a lifetime of careers, from a bartender to network engineer to HR executive, some of today's most successful companies. But one thing has always been clear throughout: she was born to be a storyteller. And she has channeled her myriad of experiences into a writing of lighthearted, quirky novels about the oftentimes hilarious human condition. And love, always love. She lives in California, fighting her inner New Yorker from breaking free too often, with a pack of 3 feisty chihuahuas and a too hardy obsession with K-pop and K-dramas. This book is a young adult romance novel. It stars Hannah and Jacob. The book is told in a dual point of view. It alternates between the two characters. They were best friends basically for their whole lives. At age 14, Jacob and his mother and sister went to South Korea for the funeral of his father. And while he was there, he was spotted by a talent agent from a idol school. And the agent asked him to join the school, so he did. And Jacob and his mother and sister stayed there. With their father dying, they didn't really have many resources, so it was a good opportunity. Hannah, though, felt a betrayal because Jacob never returned. She was angry with him. She eliminated her email, and that meant Jacob was unable to communicate with her. And he was upset with her because he had written her a lot of emails, but she never replied. A couple years later, Jacob is selected to be in a K-drama, and it turns out to be a hit. He doesn't really enjoy being in a fishbowl, though. All the things he has to do in public to be a member of this show. He hurts his ankle, and Jacob, his mother, and his sister travel to San Diego to stay with Hannah and her mother. Hannah has sublimated her Korean heritage, trying to fit in. Hannah's boyfriend and her acquaintances, they're not really friends, really more acquaintances, but they have really gotten into K-pop and K-drama. And early in the book, Hannah's boyfriend breaks up with her because he says they don't have enough in common, which is ironic because she's actually Korean, but he and his other friends are all into K-dramas and K-pop. Both Hannah and Jacob have to deal with some issues with themselves, and they have to try to reconnect, talk out a lot of stuff, communicate with each other, understand where they were coming from and what they did. And the book goes from there. I really enjoyed the book. I didn't always agree with the decisions Hannah and Jacob made, but they were three-dimensional characters, and they did have to work through a lot of stuff. There were some ups and downs. The book follows a somewhat familiar trajectory, but it was done really well. I liked Hannah and Jacob, and I liked some of the supporting characters, and there's some I did like that I wasn't supposed to like. There was only one thing I want to mention about this book just to make people aware of. There was a pretty mild, spicy scene. It wasn't especially graphic. I only mention it because there are people that don't want spicy scenes in the YA novels. So if you don't, then perhaps this book isn't for you. Like I say, it was a very mild scene, but it could disturb some people. Other than that, proviso, I recommend this book for people who are looking for a really good YA romance novel with appealing lead characters who are complex and they do struggle through a lot of stuff. And also a book that is set partly in the world of K-dramas, because I think it probably was very realistic about the expectations put on people. And sometimes I don't really watch K-dramas, but I do like some K-pop bands, and sometimes I wonder about maybe it's what the people have to go through to provide entertainment for those of us who enjoy it. I rated this book 4.5 stars, and I am definitely going to look more into what the author has done. The afterword to this book indicated this might have been her first novel, so hopefully she's done some additional work. I'm just going to read a couple passages from the book so you get an idea of the writing style. What I'm just going to do is read the beginnings of the first two chapters so you can get the idea of the perspective from each of the characters. And this is chapter 1, and it's from Hannah's perspective. Nothing says I love you more than patting your boyfriend's back as his head is in a toilet, barfing up warm Bud Light. He groans miserably. I switch her up in circles and throw in a there. It's not my dream date, but it's a good place to be, all things considered. I started high school with no close ties. Now I'm going into the summer, final year with a perfect boyfriend and built-in friend group. It's funny how life can change so suddenly when you're least expecting this. We've come a long way, Nate and me. We've known each other since we was a big, clumsy kindergartner. I was a small, mouthy one. We used to hate each other when we were kids, but fate has a way of showing up when we least expect it. Next I'm going to read the beginning of the second chapter, which is from Jacob's perspective. "Don't go, please," she sobs, voice trembling in desperation. She grabs my arm with a force I wasn't expecting, pulling me back from the door. I drop my head, barely looking over my shoulder back at her. I have to do this for myself, for my family. I don't want to hurt you, but we have to break up. My voice cracks and I'm surprised by the tear that escapes down my cheek. What am I going to do?" she wails in agony, heart shattered. Dramatic pause. "And cut," the director says, the ringing of a young woman's cries still in my ear. Next I'm going to talk about 3 books that I read part of this week. The first is Fourth Ring by Rebecca Yarros. I'm a little less than halfway through this book. I am quite enjoying it. The storytelling and the characters are really good. I really like many of them. The ones I'm supposed to. There's some I'm not supposed to like and them I don't like. The writing leaves a bit to be desired, and the world building could be fleshed out a little bit more, but perhaps it will be as the book goes on. The second book I read part of this week is Nancy Drew Diaries, number 25, What Disappears in Vegas by Carolyn Keene. I'm about halfway through this book. This book is about that Nancy and her friends Bess and George go to a wedding in Las Vegas. Bess and George's cousin is getting married. And partway through this book, just as the wedding's supposed to begin, actually, one of the major participants in it disappears. And the remainder of the book, which I'm not too far into this part of it, but the remainder of the book is Nancy, Bess, and George trying to solve the mystery of what happened to this person and why they disappeared from the wedding. And the third book I read part of this week is The Crown Games of Ancient Greece by David Lunt. This is another book that I learned about because of Jessin at Triumphal Reads. I'm only a little way in this book, but this is a good book to read at this time because with the Olympics coming toward the end of this month, it's going to be a nice look back at the not only Olympic Games, but there's 3 other major games the book talks about. So that's kind of interesting too, because I think that probably most of these books mainly talk about the Olympic Games, the ancient Olympic Games, and that's understandable. But it's interesting to read more about them. Not a particularly long book, but I'm looking forward to reading more of it. Next, I want to talk about a couple of new books I got this week. The first is Peace and Turmoil, The Dark Shores, Book 1 by Elliot Brooks. And this is kind of an interesting book because Elliot Brooks is actually a booktuber that I subscribe to. And in a recent video, she mentioned that she had written a book. So I looked it up on Barnes & Noble and they had it, so I ordered a copy. It's pretty impressive actually for a first novel because it's like it's very well done. It's a solid book, as you can see by its length. It's like maybe, I don't know, it's around 700 pages, so it's pretty impressive. The only thing I don't know, and I should perhaps follow her social accounts or something, but maybe look at old videos, but this book is book 1, but it came out in 2018, so I'm not really sure what plans there might be for book 2, because that's a long span between books. And the second book I got this week is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. It's actually an audiobook. A while back I put a hold in it on Libby, and a couple of times it did come through recently, but I postponed it because I wasn't quite ready to read it. I was reading a lot of other things. What you do when you postpone it, it basically puts you one space back in line. So when it came through the third time, I figured that it's about time I read it. So I did borrow it. It's about 9 hours. And it'll be interesting. It's a much lauded book, although there's some people who have problems with it. Maybe not in the level of fame as, say, Fourth Wing, but it's pretty famous. And so is the author. It'll be the first book that I've read of hers. Babel's perhaps even more famous than hers, but I haven't read it. So that will be interesting. Next I want to talk about a couple of Wobbles that I've been working on. One of them is Tank the Shark, which I had mentioned this on my last video because I was almost complete with this, but I didn't complete it on that Saturday. I completed the following Sunday. So I just want to show how complete a tank the shark looks. It's a pretty challenging one, but I think it came out pretty well. Then I started working on the Powderpuff Girls Bubbles Wobble, which when done will look like this. And here's where I am now with it. I've got the body done, but there is hair after doing a couple of limbs and the nose. So I'm sure I won't be done with that today, so I won't be able to put a photo, but I'll include it in my video next week. Other than that, just watching some WNBA games, walking at the local mall, eating out in local restaurants. And this past week I actually did 3 videos instead of 2 because I fell a little behind on the tags that I was doing, so I released videos Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. Mostly I hope to just do 2 videos a week, but I did want to catch up a little bit. I'd be interested in hearing how your week went. If you'd like to let me know, please add a comment telling me whether it's some really good book you read or maybe some book you didn't like, want to warn people against. But please reply in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell so you get notified when I upload future videos. I hope you have a wonderful day.